want to switch back. Thank you for starting the recording there. Okay, so in this hour, we're going to be hearing from a great panel of speakers on their perspectives on this report. But first, we're going to go to my colleague, John Quinton, a professor of soil science at Lancaster University, who is going to kick us off by giving us an overview of the report. So I'm now going to pass to John to get us started.
Great, thanks very much, Jess. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully this will work. And put it into presentation. Oh, come out on this. Okay, is that?
John, we can see the presenter view.
Ah, that's always. Is that better?
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. It's on the wrong screen for me, but never mind. Great. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here to represent our Soils and Planning and Construction Task Force today, and help launch this report into building on soil sustainability. I just want to kind of kick off by, I suppose, acknowledging the task force members. Jess has already mentioned them, but this was really a fantastic project to be involved in, with great collaboration from both Lancaster City Council, Cornwall County Council, Farrah Huxley and JTP. And it's been one of the liveliest projects I've been involved in, with lots of debate and discussion. It's been fantastic to be involved with. I'd also like to thank the funders, which include the Soil Task Force, but also the Engineering Physical Sciences Research Council through their Impact Acceleration Account, and through the ICEC Mineral-Based Construction Materials Project. That's one of the circular economy centers. So my task this lunchtime is to, I suppose, fourfold. One, to convince you that soil is something to be valued. Two, that construction is destroying and damaging soil at an alarming rate. And then three, that we can do a much better job of protecting soils in and around construction site. And hopefully that our report will help you deliver a more sustainable future. So why is soil so important? And the first reason is it's almost a kind of a non-replaceable resource. It forms very, very slowly. Our own measurements in the UK suggest formation rates of around about 0.03 millimeters per year. So once you destroy it or remove it, it's very hard to reform. It's also the biggest terrestrial carbon store. It contains more carbon than all the vegetation, all the forests, and all the atmosphere combined. Most water that falls on land interacts with soil. So when it rains, water percolates through soil, both to groundwater, which is obviously our drinking water supply, and also into rivers and lakes. So water is soil is a key component of the water cycle. And then the final one is it's alive. It's full of organisms. 1 teaspoon of soil contains billions of microorganisms, and it's also home to insects and mammals as well. And so I guess the question is, then sort of comes up is okay, so why does it matter in planning and construction? You know, many of you will know that only a small fraction of global land is built on. Estimates put it at around 1%. But I think what I'll try and convince you of is that the scale of soil degradation that occurs on this small fraction is just astounding. And I'm going to highlight 5 areas here. The loss to landfill, compaction, biodiversity loss, soil sealing, and soil contamination. And I guess the figure that really kind of caught my eye, and I was amazed with, I have to say, when I first saw it, is that around about 30 million tons of soil from construction sites was sent to landfill in 2018. And as somebody who's worked on soil loss from agricultural fields for much of my career, I was shocked with this figure. It's around 10 times that we lose to soil erosion across the whole of England and Wales. And remember, this is what, 1% of the land area. Compaction links to that. And once we damage soil structure, usually through trafficking and stripping sites, it's very hard to remediate. So once you've crushed the soil and squeezed the air out of it, getting that air and those pore networks rebuilt is very, very difficult and takes a long time. And as you compact soil and store it on site, you limit the amount of oxygen that gets into the soil, and this kills off much of that biodiversity which lives within the soil. And similarly, as we then go through the construction process, sealing soils with concrete and tarmac, we also reduce that oxygen supply into the soil, and again impact on soil biology and on soil functioning. And soil sealing is increasing at a significant rate in the UK, from around about 4,500 hectares per year in the 2000s to 15 or 16,000 hectares per year in the period 2013 to 2018. And then the final point I want to mention is soil contamination. And I'm not thinking about historic contaminated soils here. I'm thinking about the contamination with mineral-based construction materials, for example, which then render that soil unusable on site and then sends it back off to landfill to be disposed of as a contaminated waste. I want to mention just soil carbon specifically. As I know that many of us on the call are all thinking about how we reduce our own carbon emissions, but also how we drive the industry towards net zero. And much of the historic focus on carbon emissions from construction sites associated with soils has been focused on transport. And much of that is transporting that 28.9 million tons of soil to landfill. There isn't a great deal of data, scientific data out there, but we believe that the typical treatment, the subsoiling and the stockpiling and replacement of topsoil is likely to lead to considerable carbon losses on site. And one estimate suggests that out of the total UK carbon losses associated with soils in 2013, 27% was due to development. And if you think, that's 7% from 1% of the land area. So we obviously have some issues that we need to address. And that's really why we, the kind of the motivation for this report and that we're launching today. And I now want to take you through some of the highlights of that report. So I guess like all good reports like this, we we start off by having a look at what is out there already. And I think I'm not going to go into detail of all the current UK policy and guidance on soil and construction, but there is quite a bit of it. You start to dig around, you'll find the DEFRA Construction Code of Practice, which dates to 2009. That's currently being revised, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later during the panel discussion. There's the more recent British Society of Soil Science document on working with soil. There are British standards, including the specification for topsoil, trees in relation to design, processes and for designing and implementing biodiversity net gain, and the specification for composted materials. There's also national and local planning guidance, which includes information on soils. And we also have some information within the environmental impact assessment guidance. And what we try to do in the report is to bring that together. And there's a really, or something I think is really useful, a really useful table within the report, which draws all the current policy and guidance together and gives you a kind of a route to following some of that information up. But we didn't just want to review what was already there. We wanted to find out how the community was relating to existing guidance and about what they would see as how to improve that guidance. And so we engaged with a wide range of experts. Some of them and some of their logos are on here, but I've missed a few, unfortunately, from this slide. But we had some really interesting discussions with the industry, and they identified 3 key barriers to improving the integration of soil sustainability into planning construction. The first one was that soil is not understood or valued. You know, often earthworks are kind of viewed as just something you need to get through so you can get on to the real work of actually building something, and that soil was seen as muck to be got rid of off site. And project teams all the way through, from clients, designers, right through to contractors and the people on the ground, are often unaware of the importance of soils and how to design with soils in mind. Soil specialists are often brought into projects far too late, leaving little opportunity to make useful plans for soil management and protect those valuable soils from damage. There's often a lack of good quality data available on soils during the development process, and we would really recommend thinking about soil surveys that should be done during either the EIA or during the early stages of the project to provide that valuable information that can be shared throughout the construction process. And then there are time and space constraints, and we're very well aware that projects often get squeezed, timelines get shifted, and work often ends up being done and at times which are not really the best times. I mean, during wet weather, for example, when soils are easily compacted. Space limitations can be an issue which lead to poor stockpiling, leading to compacted and anaerobic soils getting topsoils and subsoils getting mixed, and them getting contaminated with other construction materials. So what would help? We think about the thinking about soil early on is going to be really important. Engaging with soil scientists during that process, understanding the soils on site, thinking about soil surveys, writing a soil management plan, and we include some guidance on this within the report that goes into detail about how that plan might be structured. We also like the idea of soil protection zones, which would be similar to the kinds of things we have around root protection zones in existing planning legislation, to protect those most valuable soils on sites. And then providing education and training for all people during the planning process, and monitoring soil at the completion of projects. And there is more information on all of these in the report that you can download from our website. So we've organized these ideas into 8 guiding principles for soils in planning and construction. And these principles are to plan, design, and construct for soil functions. So thinking about carbon storage, thinking about the interaction of soils and waters and how they can help to prevent flooding, both on-site and off-site. Engaging with local communities and stakeholders early on in the process. Reusing or sharing soil, trying to minimize the amount that ends up in landfill. Maximizing permeability on site so that water doesn't run off and cause problems off site or on site, or problems after construction. And that involves minimizing compaction and thinking about how the sites are trafficked. Stockpiling soils correctly, not mixing them, not getting them contaminated, minimizing erosion by establishing vegetation as soon as possible, and learning through training.
Just 1 minute, John.
Okay. And so the report has a lot more detail in it and specific guidance for these sectors. So there's guidance for local authorities, contractors, clients and developers, and design teams. And that includes what to look out for, the benefits of protecting soils, and links to further resources that you can access. And also other useful stuff we have in there, what there should be in a soil survey, and what a soil management plan should contain. And I guess, what we would encourage you to do now, you've made the first step in joining the webinar today, but visit our website at soiltaskforce.com and download the report. Join us at one of our regional events, and the first of those will be at JTP's HQ in London on Wednesday, the 30th of November at 6 p.m. Looking forward to being at that event, and we've others planned for Lancaster and Cornwall. We also encourage you to invite us to speak at your event. We'd love to promote the report and the value of soils more widely. And if you're organizing an event, then please do invite us. And we'd also encourage you to disseminate the report through your wider networks. The contact details are there. You can also find us on Twitter. And I guess as my final statement is don't treat soils like dirt. They are one of our most valuable resources.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks very much. And great to see lots of questions coming in and chat happening there. So please do keep questions coming. John will join our panel questions a little later on as well. So there'll be an opportunity to ask John some things there. So now we have a cross-sector panel session. I'm really pleased to be joined here by 4 great speakers. We have Noel Farah, Vice President of the Landscape Institute and Director of Farah Huxley, a practice of landscape architects and community engagement experts based in London and working on projects throughout the country. We're joined by Nick Willimbrook, Director at Contaminated Land Applications in Real Environments, Clare, a not-for-profit organisation servicing those involved in sustainable land reuse. He leads on the management of key industry guidance and initiatives. We're also joined by Martin Ballard, Group Environment Manager at Wilmot Dixon, who is responsible for embedding sustainable practices in their projects. And finally, Birgit Honst, who is a Senior Project Lead at Cornwall Council. So to start us off, I'm going to ask each of our panel members here, starting with Noel, and then passing to Nick, Martin and Birgit, to speak for no longer than 5 minutes each on why do we need new principles for soil sustainability in planning and construction now, after which we'll be putting your questions to the panel plus John. So please do keep them coming in. Speakers, I'm going to give you a little signal when 4 minutes have passed, so please try to take note of that so we have time for some questions. So Noel, can we please start with you?
It's great to be here. I just want to say thank you, Jess. And I don't really have that much to say, which anyone who knows me knows that I'm probably lying, but we'll see how we go with that. So I'm hoping to not get to the 4 minute signal, because I think what's really hit me is that just as John has explained, I think very clearly what this report says and the profound nature of it. I think I'm really moved from the fact that when we all started together and we were starting to look initially at the Balerig Garden Village project, that we have got to this point where we have now launched this report. I see this as a fantastic outcome. And I think the report is really, it has all the things I wanted to have. It is clear, it is concise, it absolutely.
We appear to have lost.
Just go back a little bit, really, and talk a little bit about Balerig. When we started doing that work, what became very clear, we did some very early consultation, and Farah Huxley were really keen with JTP to get back to first values and the actual place and the land that we had at Balerig and the nature of that land in all of its physiological characteristics to inform how that master plan might be formed. And we went out and actually consulted with the farmers themselves, the people who actually own that land. And of course, when we then looked at the morphology of settlements for just the type of landscapes that we have at Balerig, what we found is that, of course, soil traditionally used to be one of the first things that you would be looking to think about. You would never dream of building on the fields where you could grow food. You would build on the bits that you couldn't grow food on, and you would work out ways in which you would be able to maximize and preserve soil, because soil is the bit that delivers the food that keeps us alive and going as a community. But now, when you have the starting point of a master plan, often the starting point is we have a piece of land, we have an agricultural and a rural community in crisis in terms of food production and the farming world in this country, and therefore you have a willing seller, which is relatively new. Farmers would never have sold land 50 years ago in a way that they will give it up now. Farmers are in a world where they cannot make any money, where traditionally they could make money. And I think that's very, very difficult. And so what we found is that when we spoke to the farmers and they talked about their soil first, the next thing we realized is that actually people, the problem that they were going to lose their fields in terms of the economy of the farm was kind of lost, and they didn't mind. They were happy to take the paycheck in relation to that. What we've also found is that actually their biggest driver for giving up farming or and accepting its loss of land was this idea of environmental generational amnesia, which is a very complicated EGA set of words. What it talks about is the fact that society really has lost its relationship with the land almost entirely, and that point is a real background piece to how, therefore, it's not possible for often cheek by jowl activities and the use of living soils to grow food and food production and all of the variety of activities and what happen in our rural landscapes. They can't really take place because they're not really understood by the close proximity of people living and communities. So there is a sort of wider devastation around development and construction, which moves beyond what we're going to develop, but into and affecting the broader landscape beyond those points as well, which I think adds to it. But really, I have just through this entire process, myself become more aware. When I was a young landscape architect, thank you, when I was a really young landscape architect, we would do soil stripping, look at the British standard, just get it stripped and just do it. And what we now know is that is plain wrong. I represent the Landscape Institute here as well, and we are going to absolutely look to be able to try and endorse this report. My immediate call to arms here is I absolutely support the commendations that are made in the report about site appraisal, soil action plans and methodologies. And I really applaud what we've been able to do at Balerig, which is Lancaster City Council's real efforts to be able to say, how can we embed that in our planning systems here? And that's why we have Birgit, who will speak later, and Cornwall. How have they been able to address it there? And I really, really hope that these cohesions, particularly with the local authorities that are involved in their planning departments, that's the basis where we can start to get some teeth and something going with regards to this report. So I very much look forward to this report being better disseminated, and it's great to see so many people here. So I'm happy to see it go forward. Thank you, Jess.
Fantastic, Noel. Fantastic timing there. Brilliant. So thank you. So now we'll move to Nick, please, if you'd like to share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jess and John, for the invitation to join today. Yeah, it's refreshing to give a presentation without the need for PowerPoint slides for once. So I thank you for that as well. My background is contaminated land quality, previously as a consultant, and then I was going to say more recently with Clare, but I actually joined Clare back in 2008, just before actually we launched the Clare Definition of Waste Development Industry Code of Practice, which of course hopefully most of you are pretty familiar with now, but it's a pretty major tool for the construction industry in the reuse of soils, both on the sites from which they're dug and transferring to other third-party sites as well. And see, started out as this idea, this tool, as I say, that, you know, when it was launched back then, we really didn't know quite how it would go, how it would grow, and really it's sort of exploded over the years now. We're well over 140 million meters cubed of soil reused over that time. So soil, the importance of soil, the reuse of soil clearly has grown. The importance and the value, as John pointed out, though, seems to still have lagged some way behind. And we can see that when we review and audit projects using the DAOCOP. Often the decision to try and reuse the soil comes in very late, and it often relies upon using documents, lines of evidence, as we would call it, that were created before the decision was taken to try and reuse the soil. So in many ways, you're trying to have projects trying to use data that's really not quite fit for purpose, that's trying to be achieved. It really just stymies the whole endeavor, really. The two simplest things that stop soils reuse happening are either you simply do not have a receiver site nearby for your soils, so it's simply physically impossible. Or secondly, there is a receiver site, but your development phases are out of line, and neither site is willing to take the construction pain of delaying or storing material somewhere which may cause them a hindrance on their build program. And that's a direct manifestation of the problems we have when projects do not plan for soils management and soils reuse early on. The other biggest blocker is then poor quality data, as I say, gathering information perhaps from investigations that weren't necessarily planned for soils reuse in mind. And that leads to overall a sort of sense of lower confidence around the material, whether that's with the construction sector or perhaps sometimes more importantly, the regulators as well. If they get a sense that soils management and reuse is a quick and last minute thing, that's not a good basis for building a kind of solid platform for materials reuse in the future. But I think there's a kind of, those very practical things on soils management and reuse, but I think there's a first principle as well that comes in before all that, that's important around this. And I think that the report really picks this up. It's one of the first reports I've seen to do that. There's a first principle around that comes from the Waste Framework Directive, which is my world, is material a waste or not? And the first thing we think about in that is the aims and objectives. Thanks, Jess. And the most important thing we must achieve is protection of human health and the environment. The more we look, the more we learn, and the understanding of the damage we inevitably cause as soon as we put buckets in the ground is becoming clearer and clearer. So on a fundamental test, are we causing environmental damage? Unfortunately and awkwardly, yes. And we have to grasp that as an industry first before we can charge off ahead and get really excited about carbon capture and sequestration and all these really good things that are coming forward as well. But that realism is important. I think I'll finish on saying, as a contaminated land guy, ever since I've been in the industry, it was always a question of the amount of money you put into your investigation up front will give you an indication of the returns and savings you'll get later on. Simply, if you don't put your money into site investigation, you're just storing up costs later down the line. And it's the same for soils management. We need to put the time, energy, and resources up front, good soil resource surveys within soil resource plans. That will undoubtedly lead to a whole range of savings further down the line.
Great, thank you, Nick. Yeah, think about soils early on, definitely a great recommendation there. And now we'll pass to Martin, please, if you'd like to share your perspectives.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's fantastic to join you, and thanks for the opportunity. So beyond Wilmot Dixon, I come from an agricultural background. My great uncle was one of the NFU founding members of the NFU Mutual across in the West Midlands, and I've been involved in soil and stone since I was a youngster on the farm, with a regulatory background, and also with the water cycle, where I was within the water industry, and putting biosolids back to land, and then more recently in the last 10 years within the construction sector directly. The soil and stone is our greatest risk, our greatest cost, our greatest opportunity. So really, why bother for any construction site when there's clearly liabilities from runoff of silt pollution, dewatering challenges from engineering works, dealing with contaminated grounds, the legacy of the past, as well as the practicalities of working in a live environment and the risk of mud onto road, and how to contain that risk and liability on site and not allow it to transit off site, but also looking at how soil and stone is actually considered. Is it a material or is it a waste? So as a value, as a society, in law, soil is rarely mentioned. If you look at the recent Environment Act that was published in 2021, there is no mention of soil in that entire legal commitment, and that's a crying shame. And so as an overall, we look at the legal framework, and soils is disparately considered, and that is a causal point for how we value soil as a society. Picking up on what was also said earlier, the language that we use and the terms that we use will determine how we value what's beneath our feet. So in construction sector, you'll often hear the term muck away being talked about, and indeed many construction hauliers and ground workers base their commercial model entirely on muck away. They want you to recognize it as a waste. They want to deal with your dirt for you because there's decent money in it for them to haul it away. So in our legal frameworks, the European Waste Codes 170504 for soil and stone, whereas muck is 020209 if you're into that legal description. Now, the only sector that deals with manure, which is 020209, is our agricultural fraternity. But the value of soil health is absolutely recognised by the NFU, and it's fantastic to see the Foundation of Food report that really sets out a vision for good soil health. So there's much that we can learn in the construction sector for how the agricultural sector deal with soil. And whilst none of us are all perfect, there is some great practice out there. And that's what we try and uphold through, as Nick's explained, the CLARE endeavours for sustainable land reuse, with DAOCOP now heading towards its version 3. The problem is that the regulators regard soils as waste, and therefore the review period on that efficiency improvements that was all fed back as an industry into improving the definition of waste code of practice it's taken the better part of 8 years now, and we've still not got that improvement to deal with what is an essential material for our circular economy and reuse and recovery of soil and stones in the correct manner. And therefore that led to the Society for the Environment Soil and Stone project, which began in July 2019 as a real call to arms from chartered environmentalists that was put out in September 19. We met 6 weeks later in December 19. I then chaired the development of a report through lockdown, and we launched the SOCM Soil and Stones report in April 21. And very quickly, I'll just mention the core issues for action that relate to construction and land management. So a real need to remove barriers to achieve zero waste and gain the action alignment against the SDGs as a country, to better report reuse and recovery of all soil and stone. If it's regarded as a waste, we will only ever report it as a waste. And therefore, risk visibility is all important. Essentially, we get what we measure and we risk what we do not measure. So as long as we measure an end of pipe waste, we will never get the respect, the value of soil and stone as an essential material to everything that we do in the built environment, as well as in the natural or in the managed environment for food and agricultural activities. So where really is the risk from a construction perspective? Those that are committed to DALCOP and to the reuse of soil and stone, such as the larger projects where there's a lot more attention and planning focus, it is better. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it is better. Therefore, the risk is in the large majority of projects that are dealing in 5,000 tonne or less of soil, where it's of the lower order in the more rapid response of projects to planning or customer requirements in the built environment. So if you are doing a home extension project and you are digging out less than 1,000 tonne of soil, are you really bothered where it goes? Actually, it is, it's just all subsoil. Some of the topsoil you might keep for your garden, but the rest of it you just want to be shot of. And that is a cultural ingrained attitude of, well, let's just muck it away. And so that's where the real risk is. There's better practice around stockpiling, avoidance of compaction, and better practice around soil runoff mitigation that's needed. But that really needs a greater spotlight through legislative framework and regulation, which has a spotlight on soil and stone, that it is not lost in the disparate regulatory framework that we've got, and greater collaboration to achieve that is needed. And therefore, to see this report is fantastic. It provides another light that we didn't have in 2019 on soil and stone, and in the last couple of years, to see a greater attention to this most valuable material is really very encouraging. I'm conscious of time, so I look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Martin. And finally then to pass to Birgit.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Thank you. So my name is Birgit Hönsch. I work as on the client function side at Cornwall Council in the Planning and Housing Service on the garden villages. So and that's one of my roles. The other one is I'm also a landscape architect, and I'm the chair of the Landscape Institute Southwest. So I'm here really with those two hats on. And as a landscape architect, I've always been very passionate about sustainable design, about climate change, biodiversity emergencies. Then I got involved with the garden villages, and we got involved in the Soil Taskforce. And I really must say it's been such a great opportunity, and it has revealed so many facts that I didn't know. I'm interested in the subject, and a lot of the stuff has just been staggering facts and figures that are frankly quite mind-boggling in places, and I didn't know them. The council didn't know about them. And so for us as Cornwall Council, it's fair to say that this has really started a journey for us to actually really start looking at this, and as a council, going forward, when policies and guidance is updated, to actually start looking, how can we make a difference? I know there's a couple of councils out there that have made a start on soil policies, but Cornwall Council at the moment doesn't have a specific soil policy, but it certainly now is on the agenda that we have to start looking at these things. And also being involved in it, working on Langa's Garden Village, it's only a small initial step, but we have actually submitted a high-level soil principles strategy with the planning documentation. And we're now looking at how we can go forward to actually try and put the devil in the detail, the devil's in the detail, to how can we actually go forward and make this work on the ground? How can we get away from the picture that it's marked that's just in the way and has to be shifted? How can you make enough space for enough topsoil storage in a way that it can be reused afterwards? So I think for Como Council, this has been a big learning curve, and we're hoping to take a lot of that learning and use the report to talk to our stakeholders, to go out there, to speak to developers, to speak to designers, to speak to other local authorities, to speak to the bigger organizations, government, hopefully, if we can find roots in there, to actually see, look, what are we going to do about this? And how are we going to really utilize that to help us address the climate change and biodiversity emergencies? So then I guess just sort of a reflection as a landscape architect with my landscape architect hat on, landscape architects is such a brilliant profession to bring this together. So it's a holistic profession. I mean, I've become a landscape architect because I wanted to make a difference for biodiversity, climate change, sustainability. And it is a profession where we learn anything from engineering to ecology, to trees, to plants, to design. So we are an ideal place really to encourage collaboration really on that front, and to maybe act as lead designers and bring design teams together, for example, also speak to clients. Speak to clients about what they can do. And I think enlightened clients are very important in this whole subject, in this debate. So I'm really hoping that the report can help us to push this also with our, in our landscape architect world and our designer world. And just to think there is possibly, just to think about it as a landscape architect or as a designer from the start, is things like site levels. Where do you put your gardens? How do you integrate with those guys that are looking at the ecology and the trees? A tree protection zone could also be a soil protection zone. Any areas preserved for soil can have ecological and tree functions. You could design that maybe you don't have to change the levels where you want to put private gardens and keep your topsoil there in the first place, rather than moving it and then putting a bit of rubble and 150 mil topsoil layer back, which then is no good to growing food in the future. So I think in some ways, yes, we have sort of seen the policy, the legal side, but there's also really practical down to earth things that everyone in the design world can actually do and think about from the outset. So anyway, yeah, I'm out of time, but I'm hoping that really for us as a local authority, we can draw a lot of lessons from this. And for us as landscape architects, we can also draw a lot of lessons, and we can all use the report and go out there and start shouting about it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you all. Right, so we've got some time here now for some questions and discussions. So Christina's been helping us in the background and gathering together all the questions. There's been so much chat and questions, which is great to see in the chat. So Birgit, actually you ended on quite a positive note there, but as my first question, I wanted to combine a couple of questions from the chat that are looking for positives here, as we've talked a lot about impacts and negatives, and I think it is important that we look for positives as well. So combining two questions then. So for the panel, are we seeing any recognition of the soil to landfill problem, and is it reducing due to increasing cost, as a first question? And then also, are there any opportunities for positive impacts here for soil regeneration through better planning and practices? So would somebody like to kick us off on those questions? Martin, please.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, in terms of the landfill, I think there's a need for non-haz soils to be recognised. At the moment, simply grouped as inert or non-inert, and therefore non-haz and potentially reusable soils, by following the right processes, should be costed and recognised as a mid-ground. That might then help with an easier process, especially for the SME market. I think the process is not clearly understood. I don't think that the metrics that we use are clearly understood, and so therefore some simple app approach would potentially help. I mean, it is very easy to get a U1 exemption. You can reuse 1,000 tons. But there's no metric to then measure against whether that that 1,000 tons has been met. So yeah, there's a risk of immediate non-compliance, but that's an easy quick fix with the technology that's available to us that would help, you know, a soil grab lorry or a larger haul activity for a SME builder.
Great, thanks, Martin. Would anyone like to build on that? I see your Noel's coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I think on the recognition front, I've got to be quite honest and say, I've seen very little, sadly, improvement in recognition around soils, which is one of the reasons why I think the coherence and the clarity of the message that this report actually has is, I think, is of real value. And I think the dissemination of this report is important. And I do also see that the recognition is, in a way, the most critical piece. I've seen the chat, I answered in the chat, you know, yes, I'd love legislation. Yes, I'd love lots of things. And I'm going to talk about that when I answer the planning part of the question. But in truth, this is a hearts and minds job. It's about turning dirt into a valuable substrate in people's minds. And I think that is a starting point, because what do I feel really positive about? Let's be positive. But what I feel really positive about is that once we see sort of what it is, you buy soil, it costs you 30, 40 pounds a cubic meter to buy. Therefore, it has a value. It does seem to me that this basic proposition for contractors by setting up legislation means that we have a win-win situation here. We can create a commercial place whereby, you know, I want a builder to go to a site and say, oh, great, this site's full of beautiful topsoil. That's an added value, that's an added benefit to me. And absolutely what Martin was saying, that therefore it has to stop being waste. It just has to stop psychologically in your mind being waste. It isn't waste, it absolutely isn't waste. The second part of the question, which is the planning piece. I mean, absolutely, I suppose in our industry, particularly in London, the GLA have just released a new bit of guidance, which is called the urban greening factor. And they just put it on the legislature, asked everyone to comply with the urban greening factor, which all the local councils adopted. And now you have to do urban greening factor. We've embedded it in how we carry out schemes in London, and now that's done. And it provides a baseline, and it's a new measure in relation to how you ensure that all developments are contributing to biodiversity net gain. It seems to me, I think this should be and could be that simple. I do believe that there are simple processes that could be put into pre-planning conditions, pre-planning advice that simply states, have you done your soil survey? In the same way we'd have to do the urban greening factor pieces. Have you done your soil survey? What is the appraisal outcomes? What standards are you meeting? What are the criteria? And that we could embed an approach to soils through that, which through the nature of actually doing that will raise awareness of soils. But it doesn't have to be, I mean, I know the government policies for, well, we don't want to start putting more stuff, cluttering more stuff into the planning process. But this is a straight right and wrong issue, isn't it? Back to the hearts and minds. It's just right. It's just right to look after our soil, isn't it? So I think it's really doable.
Absolutely, it is right now. But fundamentally, in any activity, in any stream of life, it will always come down to money. And if the processes aren't simple and clear, for those who are, you know, in the excavator or on the digger, to do the right thing, to capture the right information, or for their directors, frankly, to operate in a safe and compliant manner, then it will be abused and it will become into the realm of waste liability, waste crime. And that's what we all want to avoid. So topsoil in effect is a material, but there's a lot of confusion out there as to whether it is a material or whether it is a waste.
Yeah.
I think what we'd like is it to move towards it being an ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Being a functioning part of the habitat.
Living.
Absolutely, Jess. So the point that I was just going to come on to Noel's second point was, we are very good at creating new stuff that we've got to do, rather than making it simpler and easier for everybody to do the right thing well once. So for example, the BNG, the biodiversity net gain mechanism that's come out, you would think, given as we've heard, the ecological value of soils would be recognised through that process.
And it's not.
Is it heck? And therefore we've shot ourselves in the foot. We've got a fantastic mechanism, DEFRA have set up a great tool. WSP and others have created their own mechanism, but in none of those tools is the soil health and ecological value of soils recognised.
And the amount of life in it, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'd just like to bring in Birgit here to hand up.
Yes, thank you. I guess I just wanted to add sort of on this that there is ways of making a difference even at that level at the moment. So you can design a house with less fill if you look at it properly from the outset. And there is sort of options that we can all achieve, and we can, like simple things like the soil survey, you need to ask for it to include the soil organic carbon and carbon balances. So to actually be able to judge, for example, of how much carbon you might actually be removing. And maybe there is then an option in future that once you get to a level where people actually have to do carbon calculations, if you want to have a net zero development or a zero development even, why wouldn't you take carbon into account? But unfortunately, even at that level at the moment, that isn't being pushed, and any guidance you look at for net zero doesn't talk about soil. Yes, if you strip all your topsoil, how many tons of carbon are you removing, and how should that actually be taken account in all your carbon balances? So I think the carbon balance stuff is probably something to take into account in future when that gathers more strength and is sort of a requirement for all sites.
Great, thanks, Birgit. And an element of this question was about regeneration as well. Perhaps John, perhaps you can comment a bit more. Regenerative agriculture is a big movement at the moment, and a lot of discussion about how it can be profitable and enhance farming rather than take. And is there something here about construction as well?
I think there is, Jess. I mean, there's work. I think beginning. There's a few kind of research projects looking at how we regenerate soils in these situations. I know some others on the call, but we have one which is just starting as part of this circular economy centre, looking at how we might use materials on site to regenerate healthy soils. And I think so. I think there are a way forward, but it is linked in to, as Martin said earlier, about how we think about soils and how we classify them as waste as well. And I think there has to be some movement in that area alongside, I guess, the research which might then help us in telling us how to put soils back together again so that they function much more adequately than perhaps they do at present. And I think that also links through to the comments Birgit was making around carbon management within soils and how we minimize the losses of carbon, both from carting soils off site, but also how, once we're storing them on site. And I don't think we know enough yet about what's going on in that space.
I think what's interesting in that space, John, the carbon space, is I think it's starting to gain traction for people. People do think about carbon footprint. A lot of my friends now thinking, am I going to get on a plane and fly? So I just did that calc, and we may end up doing lots of them. But I'm aware that a flight between London and New York in an aeroplane burns 600 kilograms of carbon, is what it is. Now, actually, based on our calcs in here, if we've got a reasonably rich soil on a site, and it might be a very small site, we get 30 kilograms per meter cubed of soil if that's lost. We get somewhere between 12 or 18 in the report, 35. I'm just using, if you use 30 as an example, which is realistic. Actually, if you take one 30-ton lorry away, it's 900 kilograms of carbon if you throw it away. So one lorry load delivers a worse impact on carbon than a flight to New York, which I think everybody realizes has an impact on carbon. The whole flight for all of them. So I think that's interesting. I think there's going to be lots of compelling arguments, which is about trying to win that hearts and minds argument that we will no doubt discuss and develop over the months that follow.
Great, Nick, do you have something quick to add to that?
Yeah, I think I'm sadly in danger of going to be a slightly negative guy here in the room. I don't mean to be. And I've come back on a couple of the points and the kind of waste. Is it a waste or not a waste? Like the sentiment side of it being a natural resource, don't get me wrong, I'm 100%. There is then the legality of it, and how you define a waste is properly codified in law and understood, and yes, that can be changed. It actually works quite well if for making good defendable decisions. But yeah, there's two separate things. Like we have the legal decision-making process. It's been tested and developed over the years, and it is what it is. Unfortunately, something can be pristine, great topsoil, but depending on what the holder does with it and how they behave with it, that's unfortunately the overriding thing that counts here. So I kind of just wanted to flag that bit as slightly negative.
Okay.
But what a great potential that can come, carbon counting and all this kind of stuff, is going to be stymied because of industry behavior at the moment, specifically the misclassification of waste. So a lot of soils are misclassified to the lower rate, which makes it artificially cheap to dispose of them. That undermines any organization that's trying to do high quality soils management, whatever the angle is. That costs money. And whilst the traditional waste industry acts as an anchor on all of this, it's going to be really hard to kind of get it going, to be honest. So
thanks,
yeah.
Nick. I'm a little bit aware of time here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask, that's a really important problem you've raised though. So I'm going to ask you in one breath to tell me one thing we can do about it. And then I'm going to come to each of the other speakers in turn for a one breath, what to do next. One thought, okay? So we're going to come to Nick and then we're going to go to Martin, Birgit, Noel and John. So Nick.
So I don't want to unfairly cause a pile-on onto the regulators, but I really, if I could ask them to do one thing, it would be go and prosecute the bad guys who are doing exactly that, because at the moment too many people are getting away with it.
Great, one breath. Martin.
Make it simpler and clearer of exactly what we want to see, so that we can all do the same thing. Use same language, same tools across all sectors. It's not just construction, it's across all sectors that are involved in soil and stone. That's
great. Birgit?
I'd say think about what you can practically do in your current project here and now to actually make a difference and start doing it.
No, one breath.
Define waste and let's attack the legals because we need to. It's a living thing. And two, let's start with planning. I think planning is the low-hanging fruit where change could be made.
Great. And John, finally.
I've got raise the profile of soil in this sector. I think
fantastic. Okay, thank you. So I just want to, in this last minute, just say thank you very much for joining us. And sorry we weren't able to get to all your questions. We're going to take them away, look at them. Please feel free to get in touch with us directly. John, can you please also share the next steps just as a reminder?
Yeah, just to remind everybody around the next steps. We have a website which is soilstaskforce.com. I'm sure somebody will type that into the chat now, where you can find a copy of the report. Come along to one of our events. First one is on the 30th of November, 6 p.m. JTP's headquarters in London. Others are planned in Lancaster and Cornwall, and I'm sure there'll be others to follow as well. And we're really happy to come out and talk to you about soil. It's something we all feel quite passionate about, and we'd like to share that passion with you. So please do get in touch, and we look forward to hearing from you. And I just echo Jess's comments. It's great to see so many people along today, and to see such activity in the chat. I just couldn't keep up with it. There was so much stuff coming through. So I'm going to go away and read through that and think about some of the issues that people have raised. But yeah, thank you, and thanks to Jess and to Christina, particularly, who's been sat behind the scenes making sure all the technology works for running the event today.
Yeah, and thanks to all our speakers again. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Cheerio, folks.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.